BQuanchi here, and today I'm going to discuss and review Berserk, a recent 2D action game that takes inspiration from games like the Mega Man series. I've also seen comparison to Azure Striker Gunvolt, which I'm not too familiar with myself, and even though I haven't played much of these series, it may be more like the Mega Man Zero or ZX games. Before I go on, I'd like to mention the best way to support the channel is to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, there's links to my socials in the description, as well as my playthrough of this game. Let me know in the comments what you think of Berserk and any suggestions of games I should review or feature on the channel. I've been following this game for quite some time during its development, mostly through social media posts and updates, and happy to see it finally come out with a pretty great reception. To spoil my review a little bit, this is going to be very positive, and I really enjoyed the game. However, I am going to discuss the game and provide my opinions, both good and bad. I do have some criticisms of the game, and even have suggestions and feedback. So to start, a quick synopsis of the story. You play as K, an inexperienced rookie who is part of a resistance against Dr. Genos and his evil forces. K soon joins up with a bird, Fury, and finds a mysterious orb which he is able to absorb, causing him to transform into a new powerful form, into Berserk Boy. There's other Berserk orbs to seek out, which Dr. Genos has bestowed onto other individuals in granting them powerful forms, similar to K in his Berserk Boy form, which would be more specific, Lightning Justice. To be honest, I feel like the story isn't too noteworthy. It isn't too intricate, but also not too bare bones either. Some aspects that enhance the story are bits of voice acting and a few stills of artwork at certain parts of the game. In regards to the gameplay, the game is broken down into different segments, which are 3 missions or stages per area. Throughout the stages, there are enemies and hazards, typically what you would expect from an action platformer. It feels more fast-paced as you can plow your way through enemies, but it can be challenging if you're too reckless. While playing through the levels, you can find and rescue others to join the resistance, as well as collecting these Berserk medals. Many of them aren't accessible during the first time playing the level, since some require the power of another form you get later, so it definitely adds replayability as you go back to past stages to reach new areas. It's not a requirement to collect everything 100%, but finding all rescues in a level unlocks an additional EX stage, which is basically like a time trial challenge, and Berserk medals, which become more important in the endgame. With the stages, it's basically getting to the end of the level and defeating a boss. On the 3rd stage of a section, you'll fight one of Dr. Genos', for lack of a better word, henchmen, who were given a Berserk orb, which gives them a power-up form, like K. Upon defeating them, you'll absorb their Berserk orb and gain their power. With these orbs, they grant new forms and powers, which adds a great variety of gameplay and satisfying progression as you gain more. These Berserk forms are based on different elements and can have very different playstyles. The first form is Lightning Justice, which has a satisfying dash attack that somewhat acts like Sonic the Hedgehog's homing attack. Also, hitting enemies with a dash can create an electrical link and allows you to shoot a projectile-like attack that hones in on the enemy. There's the Flame Drill, which is more close range in regards to combat and can tunnel into the ground, which adds some unique platforming. Then Ice Kunai, which has a dash similar to Lightning Justice, Kunai projectiles, and can grab onto certain ledges. Soaring Winds, which allows you to fly and not really combat heavy, besides having a close range projectile and a shield that can reflect shots. Finally, there's Mindbuster, which also has close range projectiles that are able to lock onto targets as well as destroy certain doors. A great thing about the overall layout of the stages is that the next sections are designed to highlight the new form that you just obtained. For example, after gaining Soaring Winds, there are levels based on using its flying mechanic. This does a great job at introducing and highlighting different moves and mechanics, but also for the most part you can play around with whatever form you prefer and change up your playstyle with these different forms. Throughout the stages, especially in the later part of the game, you will need to constantly change forms for whatever obstacles you encounter. Berserk Boy does this in a very satisfying way, in that you can hit the shoulder buttons, if using a gamepad, to quickly change form, or hit a button that pauses the action and you can select a form that you want. Both methods work really well, especially since there's many times where you need to change forms on the fly. One thing I really appreciate is that in certain portions where you use the Flame Drill to travel through walls, the game does it for you automatically. Even though switching forms is quick and easy, I really like the flow of going straight into Flame Drill when needed to progress through these segments. Another game mechanic of Berserk Boy is the option to buy upgrades. You collect currency as you play through the levels, which can be used to upgrade health, energy, and abilities of the different forms. Some of these include an extra dash for Lightning Justice, more kunais for Ice Kunai, or additional flight time for Soaring Winds. So that roughly sums up the gameplay of Berserk Boy, and now I want to move on to my positives with the game. I did sprinkle in what I really enjoyed about it while giving a summary, but wanted to recap and give some additional thoughts. With the gameplay, I really love it. It definitely stays true to 2D action platformers, and it may be with the different forms and movesets, but I feel like it's really unique and original. I believe the game's difficulty isn't too challenging, but also not too easy. Since I'm a fan of this genre and played similar games, my gaming experience may have factored in my playthrough of Berserk Boy. I really love the overall presentation of the game with its graphics and music. The graphics are that retro pixel style that you see with many 2D indie games, and I feel like they did an amazing job with the details, sprites, and backgrounds. From the different Berserk forms, to different environments, to enemies and bosses, everything looks really great. The music is composed by T. Lopez, who notably composed music for Sonic Mania, and he did a really great job with the soundtrack. I really dig the main theme for Berserk Boy. I feel like they did a great job utilizing the soundtrack throughout. With the game's design, every time you clear a stage, you receive a rank and score, which adds replayability on top of revisiting old levels to reach areas that were previously inaccessible. The variety of different forms and movesets adds so much to the action platforming and feels really good to switch between them on the fly. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is the energy system, which is used by the different moves and abilities. The energy gauge constantly refills. It feels pretty generous and doesn't feel like it holds you back from using your abilities, unlike games like the Mega Man series where you want to hold off and conserve using limited special weapons. Also considering that most of these moves in Berserk Boys involve combat and mobility, it does make sense not to have such a limiting energy system. The only times that it felt limited is when spamming that lightning strike during boss fights and running out of energy when flying as Soaring Winds. Basically, it doesn't feel too inconvenient and it does make sense. Also, there's these Berserk attacks, which each form has their own unique version, but is much more limited in usage. Since these are more like ultimate attacks, it does make sense, so that they're not spammed over and over. Now onto my criticisms about Berserk Boy, which I do feel aren't too negative, maybe my own personal nitpicks, and wanted to provide some suggestions. One thing I feel that's a big annoyance while playing through Berserk Boy is that after you clear a zone of 3 stages and gain a new Berserk Orb, the base becomes under attack. I feel like these segments add boring padding since you pretty much just search for a few enemies to defeat. Also, from a story aspect in these parts, base is pretty much completely empty, when usually you'll see a bunch of characters in the background that you rescue throughout the game. So is it that they're hiding? What's the point of having members of a resistance force if they are completely useless? I feel like these segments can be completely cut out or changed up so that Kay just needs to go to the hangar to defeat a big threat, like a wave of enemies in a mini-boss. Since these occur after getting a new form, it can give you motivation to try out that new power. Also, something that could give these parts more polish is having resistance members in the background fighting off enemies. Basically, I feel like these portions are boring and empty, and I would prefer to have them completely removed or add more to it to make it a lot more interesting. Another issue I have with Berserk Boy is with some aspects with the levels, more involving finding resistant members and Berserk medals. To recap, it's not a major requirement to collect everything 100%, but you do need to find all rescues to unlock the additional EX stages, and a good amount of Berserk medals to reach the end game. My problem is with some of these levels, locating all the rescues and such almost feels impossible to find. A good part that factors in is returning to past levels with new abilities that allow you to access new areas, which I can understand and appreciate, but there's been times that I come through the levels and still missing collectibles. Sometimes it's barely missing a ladder that's not clearly visible, but it becomes frustrating to desperately scan through the levels and not find everything 100%. Although it's not a requirement to find everything, it can be a letdown since it will prevent you from playing the EX stages. One thing I can think of that can fix this is by having a radar that can help find these secret areas in the level, like in a hot or cold kind of way. Maybe it's something that you can unlock that only normal form K can use. It just feels so frustrating not being able to find all the rescues when I'm really trying, and there are no real guides to help you find everything. Another nitpick I have with Berserk Boy is the moveset and upgrades, which I feel like it's good, but I wish there was a little bit more to it. For example, I wish that Flame Drill would have projectile like fire tornadoes, Ice Kunai would have an additional dash like Lightning Justice, or Soaring Winds could use multiple projectiles. Overall, the upgrades are pretty good, but I could see opportunities to expand it a little bit more. A small additional nitpick is with all these different moves and abilities, I wish you can check a list on how to execute them and what they do in the pause menu. Most of the moves aren't too bad to execute and keep track of, but wish it was more of an in-game reference for them. One last criticism that I have is with the game story. It does do a good job, but it's somewhat lacking. I would like to see more, like more world building and backstory with some of the characters and their motivations. I feel that with a handful of characters that follow Dr. Genos, you get a good idea what their personalities are, but I would like to know why they accepted their respective Berserk orb, or why they work for Dr. Genos. It would be more interesting to have a little more backstory to allow this game to stand out, besides common tropes like an evil doctor antagonist, but overall I feel like this game does a pretty good job with the story. When it comes down to it, I really love Berserk Boy and highly recommend the game, especially for fans of action platformers. It feels like a great mesh of retro-inspired gameplay and modern game design. I enjoy the overall action platforming and the variety of different movesets and forms, which helps it stand out. The overall presentation with its visuals and music is great as well. My few complaints about the game didn't take away from my experience playing through it. Some nitpicks are the segments between beating zones, or that I wish it was a little bit more to the movesets and upgrades. My biggest complaint is not being able to easily find everything to collect in a level, which at times leans more on a frustrating instead of a challenge to seek these things out. This is even more frustrating since it can prevent you from accessing those additional EX stages. I feel that some of these complaints can be resolved with quality of life updates, or if more guides come out to help players find these hidden collectibles. I've been following Berserk Boy over the years with its development and really glad to see it finally come out and with a really positive reception. Again, I highly recommend the game and can't wait to see more from the developers or possibly more from this property. You can check out my playthrough of Berserk Boy through the link in the description and let me know in the comments what you think of this game. Lastly, the best way to support this channel is to like, comment, and subscribe. More links and details also in the description. Thanks for watching and have a great day.